Hi everyone. In the past, I've spoken about my travel experience in China, but that also included work experience. So it's a slightly different video from this one. But I think this is overdue. Actually, what gave me the idea for this was I came across on social media an Esquire article claiming that the Philippines is the most dangerous place to travel. Now, I strongly question that. I'm not sure what they're basing that on. Maybe it was clickbait. I was only going by the headline, the title. I didn't actually look into the article, but it's a pretty extraordinary claim when you consider some of the countries in the world. I do not believe for a second that the Philippines is riskier for outsiders than Haiti or Venezuela or other parts of Latin America, for example, Central or Latin America. So what I'm going to do here is give my honest experience of my visit to the Philippines in July 2024. Like I say, I probably should have done this at the time. It's almost a year now, but better late than never. Um, as I always say with these sort of videos, although I don't make them often, this is just my honest experience. I'm going to approach this in an open-minded way. I'm going to give the pros and the cons. If I just gave one or the other, I don't think it would be honest. If you are a Filipino, I hope you won't sort of take it the wrong way. I'm just being honest as an outsider. Um, I mean, lots of tourists come to the UK and many have good experiences, but some have bad experiences. And, I can't double guess what they've been through. So I would respectfully ask that people don't sort of question my experience, because it's just honestly what I experienced. And I also want to offer some constructive feedback for what I think can improve. Um, First thing to say, I'll just get it straight out there. Overall, it was a good experience. I enjoyed my time and I'm pleased that I went. It's not something that I regret. I think it was worth doing. Why did I go? Um, Without going into too many personal details, I was visiting my girlfriend's family and staying with them. So it was to see her. It was also to see her family, simply because I want to respect their privacy. And I run a YouTube channel, but they don't, so it wouldn't be fair to sort of go into too many details there. But that's why I was there. Now, a few things to know if you're from the UK and you want to visit the Philippines. It's a country that we have visa-free travel to. Try getting a straight answer online about this. It's not that straightforward, but basically it is. Having been there, it's visa-free travel. That is to say, as long as you go for less than a month, you don't need a visa. Because from what I've seen, the process to get a visa is a bit complicated. So if you're going there a bit longer for work or staying longer, it's a bit of red tape involved. But the good news is, as long as it's less than a month, it's visa free. You just need your passport and your flight tickets. There is also one other thing you need to do on going to the Philippines. It's something called, I believe the name was an e-travel um, form. You do it online. It's not overly difficult, but it has to be done and it has to be submitted. My girlfriend sent me the link to that. If you are going to the Philippines, I'll try and get a link for you. Put a message in the comments. I'll try and get that link for you to use. But that is something that's mandatory. Now, as it turns out, when I arrived at the airport, they didn't actually ask for it. But I wouldn't take a risk on that. It's the sort of thing they may ask for periodically and you need it. You don't need to pay for it. It's just an online sort of form that you need to fill in. So that plus your passport, but no visa required. If you are going for, like I say, that's 31 calendar days or less, I would just be a bit cautious because the Philippines gets a lot of typhoons. And let's say you're from the UK and you say, okay, I'm going to go for 29 days. I'd say that's cutting it a little tight because if there's a typhoon, and your flight's delayed, that's going to cause problems. And I'm not sure if the airport they will necessarily factor that in and say, oh, well, it's not your fault, it was a typhoon. So what I done was went for, I think it was 22 or 23 days just to be on the safe side. I probably could have stayed a few days longer, but I wanted to give myself a bit of a gap between that cut-off point just in case. And in the event there was actually a typhoon that week, summer is typhoon season. So that's something to bear in mind. Now, in terms of the route, I went from Newcastle directly to Dubai on Emirates, Dubai to Singapore on Emirates, Singapore to Manila on something called Jetstar Asia. Emirates I had no problems with. I found it very comfortable, good service. The last flight, not so much. They lost my case, and they were very stingy about giving out any sort of compensation, even though it meant that we had to stay overnight in Makati City, because to go back that night to where we were going, which was Quezon Province, and then come back the next day to collect the case would have just been waste of fuel. And they said they pay out if there's an emergency, but they weren't really factoring that in. I did try, but I didn't get any compensation for the inconvenience of having to then check into a hotel. Makati City is one of the cities at Metro Manila. Metro Manila is one of the most densely populated metropolises in the world. Manila itself is not massive, it's about the size of Birmingham, but Metro Manila, we're talking around 25, 26 million people, which puts it in the top 10 most populated metropolitan areas in the world. Very, very urbanized. So you have basically lots of big cities together like Metro Manila, Manila, Quezon City, Makati, Valenzuela, and there's lots of others in that area. I have an interest in acoustics and actually studied it. Okay, so I was staying in, so we had to stay overnight, get the bag the next day. It was a nuisance and no compensation from the airline company. But to be fair, that's not really the fault of the country. Jetstar Asia, I think, is a Singaporean company based in Australia or an Australian company based in Singapore. It's one of those. But I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, is it considered a more short haul flight, so you don't expect the sort of standards of Emirates? But if they're going to inconvenience people, they should acknowledge that rather than just offering an apology. They should acknowledge the inconvenience that it causes financially. I did get my case back, but it was a nuisance. But that's it happens in long haul flights or on long journeys. But like I say, Emirates I had no problems with. Hopefully next time I'll get a direct route from Dubai to Metro Manila. The big airport in Metro Manila is Ninoy Aquino International Airport, named after the politician who was assassinated there in 1983. So that it's never a good start when you have that sort of situation. So I wasn't in the best of mood, but overall the trip was good, and I'm pleased that we filled in a lot of things. Now, the Filipino people are very hospitable. You might say I'm biased because I'm talking about my girlfriend's family, but even other people I met, within the town that I was staying in Sariaya, Quezon Province. Honestly, I found people very hospitable, interesting, interested in me, smiling, friendly. I never had any issues with anyone there. There was never any point where I thought someone was being unfriendly or cold or hostile because I was an outsider. Not once. You may hear the Philippines is a dangerous country. That I go back to that Esquire report, and maybe this is what they're basing it on. Within Southeast Asia, it probably does have higher crime rates than some other countries there. Historically, there has been a crime problem in the Philippines. There's no getting away from that, and I'm sure most Filipinos will agree with that. Having said that, I was there for over 3 weeks. Not once did I have a problem. I never felt intimidated. I never felt like I needed to be careful. Granted, I was with my whole family most of that time, but if I went for a walk, I honestly think it would have been okay. I suppose the caveat is I was in a smaller city, Sariaya. Had I been in Metro Manila, it might be a different story. So maybe I can't read too much into that. And again, I wouldn't question anyone else's experience. The Philippines has had crime problems. Um, there's been controversial wars on drugs, so that is a backdrop to that. But honestly, in my experience, I felt safe. I didn't feel at any point like I was in serious danger. Um, so that's worth pointing out. The Philippines has lots of interesting things to see. Some of the heritage there from the Spanish colonial period, but there's many interesting local sites, and I find it very photogenic. The jeepneys are wonderful. It's one of my favorite things about the Philippines. They're basically, if you don't know, they're kind of colored vehicles, and they're unique. Every owner has their own vehicle. Probably not the most environmentally friendly vehicle, and I know there's a gradual phasing out. I think some of the owners are being paid by the government to phase them into more conventional vehicles, but they're definitely a symbol of the Philippines. And I really, really hope if they're ever totally phased out, they'll be preserved in a museum or something. So I urge the Philippines, don't make the mistake that the UK made in the 1960s and not preserve these things. Because in Sunderland we had trams and we just got rid of them. That was a mistake. So if they are going to be phased out, I hope they're at least preserved in a museum or something because they're a unique part of the Filipino culture. You don't really see anything like them anywhere else in the world. They're very cheap to travel on. I think I paid about 30 pesos, which is works out at it's a very small amount, a couple of pound at most, and that will get you from, for example, I was in Sariaya, it got me to Lucena, which is the nearest sort of regional city. It won't. I don't think the jeepneys do long distance travel, so you won't do like a 4 hour travel on the highways, but it's a good way to travel around locally. Also, tricycles, as the locals call them, which is basically a motorized motorbike with a little container at the side for the passenger. They're pretty cheap and they'll go a lot of places. You know, taxis, I only had limited experience of that, so I can't comment. Generally, I don't like taxis in general, so I try to avoid them wherever I am in the world, but including the UK, but I can't comment on that. Philippines does have a railway system, but it's underused. I don't know if Sariaya even has a train station. There is a metro system in Metro Manila, and there is a train system in Luzon Island, which is the main island. But like I said, it's underused, and I never used it when I was there. And the Filipinos I spoke to didn't know much about it. So, unlike India or the UK, the railway system isn't used that much. So, can't comment on it. One thing that's commonly done there is private drivers. So basically, vehicles, I assume they have to be licensed, are hired to bring you lots of places. Um, I'm not sure why that's preferred over taxis. Maybe it's cheaper. I don't know. That's why they used. Now, pros and cons. Like I say, one pro is the Filipino people are genuinely hospitable. They're generous. They'll bring you out for a meal. Food is a very big part of Filipino culture. I personally thought it was very good. I found it filling. I found it very tasty. I've sometimes heard negative things about Filipino cuisine. Not my experience. I thought it was very tasty. It's not that easy to describe because it's quite a wide range of food. Some of it is quite a lot of noodle based food, like you'd get in other parts of Southeast Asia, but quite meat rich. There's a lot of beef and pork used. Um, off the top of my head, and I know my Filipino friends are going to tell me off for this, but I can't remember all the names off the top of my head. We went to a restaurant in Sariaya called Buddies, and it was delicious food, very good. I would say Filipinos have quite a sweet tooth. There's a lot of cake, a lot of sugary things. I would say they have quite a sweet tooth. I do to an extent, but when you've already had a big meal, it can be a bit much. But food is a big part of the culture there. The only thing I did not like was something called, and I didn't try it, I think it's called bayot, which is basically an unfertilized egg. You see the fetus of the chicken there, and it's a bit, I could never do that. Even the Filipinos I was with, some of them had never tried it. Um, I'll be honest, I tried fried grasshoppers. I'm adventurous, and honestly, they were a bit salty. They weren't great, but they weren't awful either. Yeah, I tried it. I mean, when Westerners cringe about stuff like this, the point I would make is, well, we eat crabs crawl around the ground, so really, what's the difference? I wasn't squeamish about it, and they're cleaned. It was something new. I didn't mind, and apparently they've got good protein, and they're a sustainable species, so it's all good. But like I say, yeah, the food was very good. Now eating out is not that cheap. That was one thing that surprised me a little. I thought, okay, well, things are going to be a lot cheaper than the West, and most things were. Eating out, not so much. The prices were maybe slightly cheaper, but not much. When I was in China, it was incredibly cheap to eat out in sort of eateries. The Philippines was a bit more expensive. Now, I'm not just talking about fancy restaurants and buffets. I mean, generally, it was all the places I ate in was like. I'm not saying it was expensive, but let's say a bit more than I expected. And that's not a complaint, it's just an observation. It's good food. I didn't mind paying that. Although I didn't often pay anyway, so it's just something I observed. Um, Street food, I tried a little bit. It's much like street food in other parts of Southeast Asia. It's tasty, it's cheap. I didn't try it that much, so can't really compare it. There is a coffee culture in the Philippines. There are coffee shops. That's something you didn't really get in China. Um, and very good coffee. Some of the snacks in the Philippines were fantastic. You know, good chocolate, good. I like the snacks there, because the guy that showed me around ran a shop in the local school, and he got me some of the snacks. Yeah, so it was a very good variation of snacks in the Philippines. Now, in terms of tourist sites, this is something I want to draw attention to because the Philippines has lots of things to see. There's a rich history there, um, but you need to just bear a few things in mind. If you plan to go to Mount Pinatubo, you can basically. Mount Pinatubo is a volcano that famously erupted in 1991, one of the most powerful eruptions in history. We took a 5 hour coach journey there, only to be told, sorry, you can't come in, me being a foreigner, because there was a military base there. Okay, but the problem is the tourist agency that booked this, and it was a local agency, they just didn't mention this. Now, really, it was their job to find out that information. If I can't imagine the military base just arrived yesterday, so that was frustrating. It was a wasted day. We did get compensation for the money that we paid for it, but it was frustrating. They put us into a hotel, and it was just a wasted day, basically. Disappointing. As it turned out, we did get to go to another mountain, Mount Anahaw, which is just as tall. Great views from up there. I enjoyed that day. That was one of my highlights. It was Mount Banahal, overlooking Sariaya. Well, it's overlooking a good part of the province. Is huge, and actually, that's why when typhoons strike Luzon, that part of the island is relatively shielded. Because Mount Banahal, literally, it's got a semi-spiritual connection. But at the top, there was a coffee shop. There was a sort of greenhouse, botanical centre. Great views up there, although it was a bit misty that day. It was cool enough actually for the Philippines. Now, bear in mind, I was in a tropical country in summer. Average temperature was pushing 40 Celsius, but the top of Mount Banaham might be more like low 20s. So that was comfortable for me. It is a hot country, so be prepared for that. I knew it was hot. I knew it would be warm when I arrived. But genius here gets badly sunburnt. Now, I'm not going to criticize the country for that. That's no one's fault but my own. We went to a beach, San Narciso, because even though Sariaya is on the coast, we had to drive a good 4 or 5 hours to reach there because there was beach huts that you could rent out. Now that was a special place. I enjoyed it, and I went swimming. There was tropical fish. It was very interesting. I did get badly sunburnt because I'd applied a bit of sun cream, but not enough, and I didn't wash off the salt water enough. So, with my color of hair, you can imagine it was deeply uncomfortable. The next, probably for a week, I couldn't walk properly. It was very uncomfortable. But I've no one to blame but myself. I'm just putting it out there. If you go swimming in the Philippines and you've fair hair like me, just be aware the sun's powerful. It happened to me once before in Greece, so I should have learnt my lesson. Do I regret swimming? No. We took a boat trip to Little Island. Still a good day, but yeah, I should have used stronger sun cream. Maybe I should have swam at night time. But you need to be careful of things like stonefish, which are in that part of the world and can be venomous. In terms of animals, actually, there's a type of bovine called a caribou, and like the jeepney, it's sort of a symbol of the Philippines. They're big, big, muscular bovine. They're pretty docile. I'm not sure how dangerous they are. They're big animals, but they are. You often see them in fields. I'm not sure if they're used for beef production because they're a bit more rare than regular cattle. But they're worth seeing. They've big horns. Yeah, I thought they were pretty cool. Um, we went to a place called Villa Escudero, which I'll show you the fridge magnet I've got. Now, I didn't pay for it. I understand the entrance fee is not that cheap, but included you have a whole day. There is a restaurant literally at the base of a waterfall. If I'd make any comparison to the UK, it's slightly like Craigside in Northumberland. It looks nothing like it, but in terms of being a wealthy home, that had innovative people living in it. You know, this was a Spanish Filipino family who I think one of them was an inventor, and there's a hydroelectric waterfall there. But a cool thing about Villa Escudero is this is in Quezon province. At the base of it, yeah, there's a waterfall, and you can literally have lunch with your feet in the water. It was wonderful. It was a unique experience. As you see, there's a big colonial house here. It's famous for its pink stone. That's now a museum. There's a caribou. So they were used to carry around the carts. That was possibly my highlight of the trip. It was a very interesting day, special experience. So I'd recommend that. I'm not sure what the entrance fee was, but if you look at it and you think, whoa, that's steep, it does include a lot of things. So that's why there's also a raft trip that's included. So caribou ride, a raft trip, lunch, the museum. It does include quite a lot. Um, let's see. So, Kame Nehezis, that's also in Quezon province. I happened to be a bit busy that day, but the experience was interesting. The Philippines is a devoutly Catholic country. This is basically a big statue of Christ. But the fascinating thing is, on the way up, you see the Nativity. Not the Nativity, sorry, the Passion. It's like the the Villa della Rosa in Jerusalem, but it's basically the points of the cross, all sculpted out in statues, like literally the Last Supper, um, Saint Veronica giving the cloth to Christ. It's all done along this like mountainside. It's pretty high. I think I counted almost 300 steps. So, you know, it is quite a hike up there, but it's impressive. The statue's pretty big. I'd say a good 25 foot. Um, it was well worth seeing. Then there's a cathedral at the base. Um, if you can, I recommend go to one of the cathedrals there. Because for one thing, when it's hot outside, they're nice and cool inside. I'm not a Catholic, but I like church architecture, and you know they're peaceful, relaxing, interesting places. So I find that interesting. Now I was talking about pros and cons. Those are all interesting things to see. There were a couple of times we tried to see tourist sites, and we couldn't because they only done um, for example, there was a colonial house in Sariaya. We just couldn't see it because they only done tours, like group tours, that is to say. They wouldn't do individuals or couples. And I just thought, that's like, this is not a tourist city. Surely you'll get more revenue if you're a bit more open about this. So I honestly do think that the Philippines is a country that has a lot to offer, but the tourism sector there needs to honestly get its act together a bit. It's not the most tourist friendly country. By that, I don't mean it's unfriendly. I mean it's just not user friendly. They don't factor in like why only group tours, for example. You know, that's not very practical. A lot of people don't travel in a group. They travel as couples or even as individuals. So it's just cutting off their experience by saying, "Well, sorry, you can't do it. Only group tours." So I think they need to be a bit more flexible in that regard if they want to get more tourists. The prices, like I say, it's overall it's definitely more affordable in the UK, but there are some things that you'd actually pay similar prices to the West. Like I say, eating out was only slightly cheaper. Um, Filipinos love malls, and not just in Metro Manila, in the Senate as well. Big malls, you know, very fancy, very lots of trendy shops, restaurants. So that's a big thing I would say in the Philippines. And they're nice and cool inside. Metro Manila, like I say, is huge. I remember the evening we were going around. Uh, Actually, I should say that day I went to the volcano wasn't entirely wasted. The evening was good. I had one of the best buffet meals I've ever had. And then there was a kind of dance performance. It was all indigenous dancing. The Philippines has lots of ethnic groups, like the Igorot people. These are people who preceded the Spanish period. So it's a very rich culture in the Philippines. That I found that fascinating. Just a few more things to add. Like I say, my sunburn experience was my own fault. Um, there are a few things you need to kind of, as a Westerner, you might not be accustomed to. There are a lot of stray dogs, and honestly, some of them are in a pretty rough state. But then there's also quite a lot of rough sleepers. There is there's no point glossing it over. There is poverty in the Philippines, but that could be a little bit hard to see sometimes. But like you get in other developing countries, you need to be a little bit careful with, for example, me and my girlfriend were approached by two little girls who wanted money. Me, they looked relatively well dressed, so I was slightly suspicious. But then we gave them like the rest of the drink that we had, a soft drink, and they took it down like they were quite desperate for it. So then I thought, yeah, they're probably being sincere. But it can be hard to see that if you're into animal welfare, the Philippines can be, you know, that's there's stray dogs and they're not exactly. I know there are charities that look after that problem, but it wouldn't be honestly, I don't think it's on the list of priorities for a lot of Filipinos. I'm not saying that as, it's just something I observed. So if you're sensitive when it comes to animal welfare, and I know cockfighting is a sport there, the blood sport, I didn't see it, but it does happen. So, just be aware of that. There are cultural attitudes regarding animal welfare, which are different. Having said that, I came across a charity that looked after street dogs. They do fantastic work. So you can never, just because something's part of culture doesn't mean it's the whole picture. There are always people in countries who will try to challenge cultural aspects that be changed perhaps. Um, what else can I say? Weather, yeah, when it's typhoon season, it rains something else, like, and that could cause flooding. So just factor in, that could affect transport links. Um, I think what else I can add. Overall, if I'm ranking my overall experience out of 10, I'd say probably 7. The sunburn wasn't fun, it was my own fault. The tourism industry, it's a pity because there is a lot of interesting things to see. I think they can improve that. But for the most part, the hospitality of the Filipinos, the things that are accessible are genuinely worth seeing. Um, some great wildlife there as well. And it's a unique country. It isn't really comparable to anywhere else. So for all those reasons, I would say it was more a positive experience. And if I go back up there, some of the things in mind that perhaps I would have regretted. But finally, wildlife. I'm sure there are venomous snakes and things like that. What I saw was a lot of lizards. I wasn't really bothered by them, but at one point, a huntsman spider came into my girlfriend's apartment and she wasn't bothered. It freaked me out because I know from huntsmen some are dangerous and some aren't, and I just didn't know what this was. So I was like, I'm trying to be the tough guy, trying to get rid of it, but honestly, I was scared. The lizards did not bother me. Um, Philippine eagle is a protected species. They're very rare. I think they're only seen in some places. So anyway, perhaps any Filipino perspectives would be useful here. Maybe if you want to follow up on anything I've said, maybe explain something. I would say overall it was a good experience. Most Filipinos speak English. It is one of the standard languages in the Philippines. Tagalog, if you can learn a bit too, I think that's respectful to the host nation. I learned Bayat Po, Salamat. Well, there was other things I learned as well, which I can't remember off the top of my head. But when you're in a country, I think it is good to try. Um, and I'll leave it there. But yeah, overall, I'd say it's worth a trip. I felt pretty safe there. There were some things that were frustrating, but the thing about the airline company and the sunburn, that's not the fault of the Philippines. And I actually think that airline companies went defunct now. It's just a risk that happens when you make a long journey, and it was long, 7 hours, 7 hours, and 3 hours. So it's a long hike. It's one of the longest trips you can make from the UK. Um, if anyone else has any questions to try and answer, my purpose here is just to be honest, to give constructive information for people who may want to travel to the Philippines. I should say I didn't take any ferries to other islands. The Philippines is an archipelago. I didn't go to Cebu. I didn't go. Mindanao is generally not recommended to travel to because of the security situation there. I can't comment on the other islands and maybe cultural differences from Luzon, so I was on the main island. But overall, I would say it was a holiday that was worth taking up. It's pleasant memories for me for the most part, and I would recommend it. I just hope the Philippines tourism sector can sort of, yeah, be a little bit more accessible because it doesn't get anywhere near as number of tourists, for example, Thailand would. I haven't been to Thailand, but I wonder is the reason for that because it's not as flexible as it could be. So that's just some constructive feedback. If you have been to the Philippines, let me know your experience. If you're a Filipino, of course, give me any feedback. Um, like I say, it's just pros and cons. I'm just being honest. So I hope no one sort of gets overly sensitive and thinks that I'm being overly critical because I don't think I am. I think this is balanced. Anyway, thanks for watching and ask me any questions you want to.